So Venus for a Cancer ascendant. What are the houses that Venus rules over? Well, Venus rules over the 4th house, and Venus rules over the 11th house. Now, again, those of you who have been taking the mathematical yogas course through the astrological apprenticeship program, you know we've gone over that rule that when a benefic rules over an angle, and the 4th house is an angle, that it tends to lose some of its auspiciousness. Now again, why is that rule there? Well, it's a generality to help people just remember some basic things. But for a Cancer ascendant, it is a little more appropriate because we see that when Venus rules the 4th house for a Cancer ascendant, it is also ruling the 11th house, which is one of the more difficult houses for any ascendant. It's one of those houses, the ruler, which causes the breaking up of positive yogas. And so that rule is there, but we always have to think about what is the other house that the planet rules. So ruling the 4th and ruling the 11th, that does tend to give more difficulty of this benefic, this gentle planet Venus for Cancer ascendant. Now, when we think about a Cancer ascendant, Venus rules the 4th, which is one of the reasons why Cancer ascendants tend to be good mothers and good nurturers. Again, we always need to go back to this idea of remembering that the ascendant gets its characteristics, its stereotypes, not just because the moon rules the ascendant, not just because it's the 4th sign, although that's part of it, but it gets that quality, it gets that stereotype based on how the other planets are situated as house lords from the ascendant. And having Venus ruling over the 4th, and it being Libra, which is more relationship-centered of the Venetian signs, this is one of the things that gives a Cancer ascendant the ability to promote and share and embody these, what we consider to be mothering qualities. It typically makes a Cancer ascendant a wonderful nurse, a wonderful nurturer, a wonderful provider. They're usually very good at beautifying an area, a landscape, a home. Again, because it's Venus in this idea of relationships, of exchange, Libra, which is ruling over the 4th house for Cancer. Now, Taurus is the 11th house for Cancer. And for that reason, it's Taurus, which is an earth sign, an artist sign, a sign of wealth and resources and responsibilities, and it's falling in the 11th house for a Cancer. So this is one of the reasons why Cancerians tend to accumulate wealth related to things of beauty, such as art or fine things, investing or purchasing furniture, which has a lot of value and doesn't lose its value. They're good at purchasing and investing in things and buying things which don't lose their value, generally speaking. And that's because it is Venus ruling over the 11th for the Cancer ascendant, and it happens to be Taurus, which is more earthy, physical types of things. So if your parent is a Cancer and they pass away, more than likely, there will be other things in the chart indicative of this, but more than likely you will inherit pieces of art or property or beautiful things of value. That will be what your inheritance will be on a general level. Less likely will it be things like valuable stocks, because it's a whole different kind of quality to it. So when we think about Cancer and we think about Venus, we need to bear in mind the house rulerships of Venus and what it's doing for the Cancer ascendant. Now, for Cancer, Venus is debilitated in the 3rd house, and Venus is exalted in the 9th house. So what does that tell us more deeply about Venus for a Cancer ascendant? Well, number one, when we think about Venus being debilitated in the 3rd house, maybe you have noticed this, maybe you haven't, but sometimes when you interact with a Cancer Ascendant, a Cancer Ascendant will have wonderful capacity for tact, wonderful capacity for diplomacy when it comes to going to church and dealing with people that they're in their church group with, ninth house things. They'll have wonderful capacity for tact oftentimes when it comes to things like politics or law or legal matters. One of the reasons why a Cancer Ascendant can often be a very wonderful politician or lawyer, because that Venus is exalted in the ninth house, where that's where these things manifest or the qualities of them come forth. But a Cancer Ascendant tends to have difficulty with their more immediate friends, with their siblings, with the peers that are closest to them. It's almost like their tact just goes out the window. They have less capacity to understand and interpret kinds of words that will make a friend or a peer or an immediate coworker pacified. And that's because Venus is debilitated in the third house, which is where those qualities manifest. Also, it's Virgo. Virgo is the sign that deals with how we fit into our day-to-day routines, because it's the natural sixth sign of the zodiac if we start counting from Aries. And that also can show how a Cancer Ascendant has difficulty at times relating to their peers and their coworkers. Oftentimes they become dominant, or they become very motherly and overbearing. They don't understand how that is cramping or not nurturing the people who they're working with. Oftentimes, when you get a bunch of Cancer types together in a work environment, there develops almost a nasty, unhealthy pecking order, where there's levels of cliques and things, and that's because Venus is debilitated in the third house. So we need to be aware of this for a Cancer Ascendant. It's just a natural phenomenon, but if the Cancer Ascendant is working with their Venus well, if they're learning to embody that Venus in all circumstances, along with their siblings, their peers, that'll be okay. But also think about Cancer Ascendants and their siblings. Why might it be that Cancer Ascendants often have difficulty with their siblings? It's that Venus being debilitated in the third house, that quality of that energy, that blueprint, which gives them less tact, less diplomacy in that regard. They might be able to communicate well, because again, that Mercury, if it's exalted, can be helpful, or acting like it's exalted can be helpful. But remember, it's still the third house, and it's still a third and 12th house Lord Mercury. So even in their attempts to communicate clearly, oftentimes it won't come across well. It'll come across kind of harsh or even manipulative to a degree, because Venus isn't necessarily helping with that idea of the blueprint of Venus being debilitated in the third house. On top of that as well, since Cancer types tend to be more motherly, they'll tend to take that role and that responsibility. Some siblings don't appreciate that because they already possibly have a mother which does that for them. So there are numerous things that can cause this difficulty based on Venus being debilitated in the third house. Now, when we think about the 4th and the 11th Lord, that being debilitated in the third house, that quality. And remember, when we discuss these kinds of ideas of the 11th and 4th Lord debilitated in the third, this has nothing to do with actually having that there, although it will be amplified if that is the case. We're simply talking about the natural blueprint of these qualities, of how they will tend to work well or not so well based on their natural exaltation and debilitations. So having the 4th and 11th Lord debilitated in the third, well, what causes a person for a Cancer Ascendant or Cancer Ascendant to have lack of gains, 11th house things? It's going to be an overemphasis on spending. It's going to be an overemphasis on spending. So a Cancer Ascendant can do very well at having very valuable fine things in their life, which again accumulate value as it goes. But when you take that 11th lord and you stick it in the third, what happens? Well, then the idea of gains, of wealth, of spending, in a sense, gets all wrapped up together, and they spend too much. So that is a drawback for a Cancer ascendant. They spend on too many fine things that they go into debt, and that's not a way to live. They overextend their debt. When we have the fourth lord debilitated in the third house, what is one of the reasons that we consider Cancer to be more of a homebody? Well, it's because if you have the fourth lord debilitate in the third, they're going to be moving around too much. They're going to be unhappy because they don't have a stable base. So Cancer ascendants, that obviously they can still be world travelers, because Cancer, from a Gemini perspective, actually deals with being able to move your home wherever you want, like a crab. But it's when we have the idea of seeking out luxury, or seeking out better things, or seeking out better situations and circumstances, if that becomes a hobby, that fourth lord placed in the third, that idea of placing it in the third for a Cancer ascendant, that's the kind of Cancer ascendant which doesn't know when they found something of value. And they're saying, well, I should move here. They call their astrologer and say, oh, do you do astrocartography? Because I think if I just find the right place, everything's going to work out great. And it doesn't. And then they call another astrologer and say, well, I did astrocartography with this one person. It didn't work, so maybe you could do it for me. And it doesn't. And then they call another astrologer and say, this astrocartography thing, I'm sure someone's going to get it right eventually. But these other two jokers, they didn't get it at all. And they move again, and it doesn't work out. So you see, too much movement is one of the things that sabotages a Cancer ascendant in regards to their ability to be happy. Doesn't mean you can't move as a Cancer ascendant. It just means that if you're doing it for the reasons of greener pastures and always looking for something else, that's probably speaking to some other kind of psychological complex or inability to find happiness within oneself, which again, if you had Venus in the fourth house for a Cancer ascendant, they would naturally have an inner sense of contentment, a feeling that what they do have is enough luxury. What they do have is enough good fortune. The pastures are green enough here. They would feel that sense of contentment. So these are some ideas to consider when you're thinking about Venus for a Cancer ascendant.